What is going on? What is going on? Hello, hello, hello. Let me bring all my notes up for myself. Hey, what's going on, guys? Hello, my name is Josh. Welcome to Dungeoneers Pack. Thank you guys for joining me this Saturday afternoon. Been a very eventful week. Yesterday was a very eventful day. So yeah, today we're going to be jumping into characters I've played. So I wanted to discuss and kind of show off all the characters I played throughout my time mainly as on the player side of playing a 5th edition, to also show how I went from somebody learning the game, a novice, and being really mechanically driven, and how I opted and changed into more of a role player, story driven player. Because there was a lot of things that influenced and why I made the change and what allowed me to pretty much fall in love with the game. So, what's going on, Thunderwolf, Dreamweaver? Thanks, you guys, for dropping in. So, I have a bunch of characters you guys can check out, or I will have a bunch of my characters. We're going to go through, kind of explain them. I'll answer any questions regarding specific builds, of abilities that I had with them, but also go over some of the character story, backstory, and also go through my history of 5th edition. So, I think we're going to kick it off and get started. And let me switch for you guys. So, pretty much these are all my characters. I messed up and I left one out. But these are all the characters I played in chronological order. If you notice, Liberius Levin is there multiple times. So there's an explanation for why he's there. So we're gonna kick it off. We're gonna start off talking about my first character ever, which was Calrock, a half-orc battlemaster fighter. I got him up to level 4. So he was my first character in 5e. When we started playing 5th edition, we had, me and my playgroup had no clue what the hell we were doing. The only ones in my playgroup that knew how to play D&D was, of course, the DM. And a couple of the other guys have played D&D previously or from previous editions, but mostly everybody was new playing 5th edition. And there was 9 of us in that group total. 1 DM, 8 players. We didn't all play at the same time, but a large group of us did. So, me going into playing my first character, I wanted something simple. I didn't really want to do magic spell casting. I felt very intimidated by the idea of casting a lot of spells and having to learn a whole system. I just wanted to learn the bare bones of the game. Big mistake. Big mistake. So, Calrock, being my first character, had no backstory. He was just a mechanics bot. I just was like, I want to hit stuff and that's it. He had no personality. I didn't even do a voice. I didn't do anything with him. He was just pure mechanics. And on top of that, since I didn't understand the system and how resource management worked or anything, I was too afraid to use my battle master maneuvers. So what did my turns consist of a lot was swinging, missing, and then passing my turn. That's pretty much was majority of my time in my first sort of campaign. The campaign that this character was featured in it was still Forgotten Realms, but it wasn't any of the campaign books. It was more so whatever my DM was kind of coming up with and throwing at us. And since we were a bunch of new players that were mainly pretty much murder hobos, chaotic people that just did a bunch of stuff and didn't really role play, I guess. People got into character, but it wasn't necessarily really role playing if you were that way. A lot of us, since we were coming off of playing Magic the Gathering, being very competitive, or having a heavy MMO background, everything was optimization and mechanics, so it was more so a combat simulator. I quickly got bored of this character, and I jumped over to Liberius Levin, which is probably my longest running character that I've played in 5th edition. I made the switch because, one, out of all the players, you would think, out of all the players, we have 8 players out of 9 of us total. Nobody was our arcane caster. Nobody was the special spell guy. Nothing. We had a cleric, we had a druid, and then we had a bunch of marshals. Pretty much, yeah. We had a bunch of marshals. So I'm trying to think. Yeah, we mainly had martials. Everybody just wanted to hit stuff. So I made the switch. I was like, hey, I want to learn how to spell cast. I want to be the fire mage again, coming off of Magic the Gathering, and being like my big influence was that I prefer the color red. I like burning stuff. So I was like, oh, I want to play a fire mage in DnD. Let's 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 do this. My DM let me switch, and again, there's really no backstory to this character. He was just kind of just going off the ideals and personalities that you would just roll. This character was just kind of a super nerd. No real anything. But it was my first attempt at really getting into optimization. I was looking at which spells were the best, looking at which feats I should take as a wizard, looking at playstyles. He was an evocation wizard. So Fireball Fireball was my jam when we got enough high enough level to actually cast it. And just counterspelling everything. That's pretty much what this guy did. But again, no personality. A little note with Calrock, another thing, the character prior, why I stopped playing him too, after just being mechanically bored. The character had 3 stats under 10. So that first character had 3 stats under 10. So they were all my mental stats. So he had no charisma, he had no wisdom, and he had no intelligence. So he was just all con, dex, and strength, which is pretty bad since mental stats, I think, help push roleplay elements to your character. And since I dumped all those and just went all physical, when I wasn't missing every attack, because I just had bad luck with rolls with that character, I also was getting shut down by charm and mind altering effects. So the character became ultimately unfun. While switching over to Levin, I had more options in combat. I wasn't just swinging around. I was like, okay, which spells I was going to use? But being that I wanted to be just a blaster damage mage, most of my decision making was, yep, we're gonna burn it. We're just gonna drop fireball and then we're good to go. No. Okay, cool. Reconnected. Sorry about that, guys. The next character I played was Picard Shattergang. We stopped playing that main, like our main first campaign. We wanted to try new characters. A lot of new books were coming out with a lot of new subclasses, and we're just like, okay, we want to try new characters, try new things, and experience. So another of our buddies that was in the group, he took over and DM for us. And for me, this was still at the point where Volo's Guide to Monsters hadn't been released yet, so there were still no official goblin racial traits. And at the same time, too, there was no Magic the Gathering. I believe it was the plain touch or plain supplements that were introducing also more player options. And I believe a few of them had goblin ones too. Those weren't out yet. So this was still very early on, 5th edition. I think this was still a bit after Elemental Evil came out. So we jumped over, we played, and I made a Goblin Arcane Trickster Rogue. And this is where I started like getting into transition of starting to try to maybe incorporate a little bit more story into the character, because I started getting more familiar with the game. But at the same time, I was full in on mechanics. Arcane Trickster Rogue was my jam. The character, the homebrew aspect of this character, he didn't really have too much of a difference in terms of what racial traits we made up. He still followed a little bit of the small race packaging at the time in early 5th edition, where they had like 25 foot movement speed. They were considered small, but the only trait that really stuck out to me at the time was that for whatever reason, this character would be able to add a +5 to their attacks to hit when they come out of hiding or when an enemy doesn't see them. I don't know. I didn't develop this trait. This was something my DM at the time did when we made him. And yeah, so me being an optimizer, looking at what I needed to build for this character, I took Sharpshooter, which most of the time it was bonus action hide, come out of hiding, like people didn't see me, pop them, Sharpshooter, add an extra 10 damage plus sneak attack, and that +5 that I added was negated by my Sharpshooter. So I was always just rolling pretty flat. and having whatever other bonuses I had. So it was a good time. This character, like I said, had a little bit more of a personality to them. They were a goblin merchant who went around and sold goblin wares, which in reality were stolen goods, because the whole idea for him was to become rich so that he and his goblin brothers could expand their empire and just kind of take over everything. That was the general idea behind this character. He wasn't really good aligned. He was more of a neutral, lawful neutral goblin, but my group was mainly chaotic, so he just fit well within them. In terms of spells that were I used a lot, and we only played him for like level 3. For 3 levels, uh, was Tasha Serious Laughter was one of my main spells. Sleep and Mage Hand, obviously, for Arcane Trickster. He was still a fun character, but I like the general idea of him. But obviously, with the level role play and stuff we were still doing at the time, there was more to be desired. At this point, though, we stopped playing. A lot of us weren't in love with the game yet, and I think that was the biggest thing. We were playing mechanics heavy. We were just kind of diving in and pretty much learning to play the game. And then we opted back. I had gotten heavily into collecting board games at the time too, and we were heavily back in like full competitive Magic. So we stopped playing DnD for a short amount of time, opting to play these other games. And then we came back. All of us had the itch to play again, and then that's when I brought in Sprat. So after maybe a year or so, we all kind of reconvened and wanted to play D&D again, but we wanted a little bit more of a story. We wanted a little bit more of a through line, because in our original campaigns, they were necessarily just a bunch of loosely set of adventures where we were kind of just like adventurers going in, had a mission, and that's it. There was no really story kind of binding us and connecting us. So when we got back together in our original DM, we said, hey, we want you to run us something, but we actually want a cohesive story campaign. We want to actually have an endpoint. And he's like, okay, I'll run you guys through Storm King's Thunder. So half my group brought back their old players because we were still playing in Forgotten Realms. And I brought in a new character because I liked playing goblins. And but I didn't want to just rehash my old goblin that I had played previously. So I was like, I want to play a skill character, but I also want to cast magic. I'll go try Bard. So at the same time, too, I was watching Critical Role. And then Matt Mercer had put out his own College of the Maestro Bard subclass. And this character was a bit of a dud. The whole idea behind him was that it was a goblin bard who saw the world as his stage, and that the living beings in them were his instruments. So he would play them and control the battlefield like if it was a grand orchestra. The problem is that character, the shtick got really old, and at the same time too, since I was still kind of coming off of this mechanic-driven mindset, I felt very flat. Mercer's Maestro just didn't feel powerful. Even if I were to pull it back, you can find it on DM's Guild for free. It's not to my liking, and it's just something about his design, and it's a follow through. It still happens to this day. If you look at I believe, what was it? It's Taldor Reborn, their tragedy bard. Something about the way they design bard subclasses compared to what Wizards does is that there's a lot left more to be desired, and you don't really get a full utilization of merging that mechanic, the core class mechanic, with bardic inspiration uses, or those usage just aren't strong enough to really support the theme. And for me, the Maestro subclass just was that you had uses for it, but they just didn't feel beneficial at all times. You ended up just wanting to use them for your bardic inspiration instead, compared to something like a sword bard, or what else did we play? A sword bard, or pretty much any of the other bards I've seen that you have an additional use to use it. In my story King's Thunder campaign, the bard was a creation bard that we had in the party, and well, they would give them people bardic inspiration and get additional benefits for doing it, which was a lot cooler. So that was like the big thing. Since I didn't like this character and I was just not having fun with it, I was able to bring back Liberius Levin, but at the time Wizards of the Coast had put out the first Unearthed Arcana for the Artificer, which that Artificer is terrible. This was the one that had the Gunsmith and the Alchemist. The Alchemist had like a bag of tricks that had a bunch of magic items that you can just throw at people, and they had to make saves. And then the Gunsmith had the Thunder Cannon, which was this big rifle-like gun that shot out thunder and lightning damage. So with this character, what I made changes to him. So Liberius Levin previously was a blank slate. I didn't really have a background or anything. When we ended that campaign, the whole idea was that the city of Flan, which originally was where this character was picked up by the group, I had retconned it that this was his hometown. And when we left, the end of that campaign, the first campaign that he was featured in, Flan had been destroyed by an ancient green dragon. So I retconned it that, well, this was his hometown, and the last thing they remembered was, you know, his whole town had been destroyed. They escaped, and that during the time span between Storm King's Thunder and that event, he had been searching for magic items to eventually get revenge and go back to kill the ancient green dragon that destroyed his home. And during that time, he found a magic item that switched his soul into a Warforged body, and his body was shunted somewhere else, and that was part of the part of his arc. And Storm King's Thunder was getting his body back and turning back into human. So that's why you see Warforged into human, because that eventually happened. And it gave my character a bit of a through line. I was able to actually find a voice, and I was actually gave him a story to roleplay. On top of that, since he was getting back into the world, this is my longest running character. But on top of this, since I had so much dived into the roleplay aspect of the game at this point, and again, I'll go into what made me switch after going through all these characters. And if you guys have questions regarding specifics to these characters or just general favorites or not, go ahead and drop those in the chat. But the Gunsmith UA Artificer was not powerful. It was it was lacking. There was something missing with that, and I think it was a combination of my play experience with it, since I missed quite frequently, so I never feel like I got to use the gun. In addition to that, the Storm King's Thunder, spoilers, features a ancient or a blue dragon, and then features a lot of cloud and storm giants. Well, cloud and storm giants and blue dragons are resistant to thunder and lightning damage, technically. So what happened a lot of the time? Well, even if I hit, I was not doing a lot of damage, and I felt mechanically weak. But I had fun with the character because he was a little bit more developed roleplay wise, and at the same time, since I was weak in combat, I took up more of a face roleplay role in the party, which the party needed, since we no longer had the bard since I switched off, and we still needed somebody to negotiate and do all the heavier roleplay aspects. So I had a lot more fun, and also this was the character that really taught me resource management and understanding how to utilize the action economy completely, as I was finding different ways, using different items, using my action economy in ways to still be helpful to the party in combat. I played way more of a supporter role, finding buckets, rope, nets, and all that stuff to kind of like hinder the enemy, so the rest of my team can go in and go ham and get rid of them. So we ended the campaign. I was a level 14 Gunsmith Artificer, and then after Storm King's Thunder, we decided the campaign's finished, let's move on to new characters. And I'll get back to Levin because he's gonna pop back up after all of this, and I'll explain where I'm at with him at the end of this. I left one character off. We played a short run of Tomb of Annihilation. I had a character there called Gonzo. He had a really long name, pretty much a half elf sword bard. We didn't play Tomb of Annihilation too long, but I just wanted to mention him. Sword bard, he was fun. General character was a character pretty much had daddy issues. He was trying to deal with his dual identities of being a half elf and also being human, and trying to find his place in the world. General idea, and that he was sent to. He went to Cholt, as his father was had succumbed to the death curse, and was finding a cure because he did not want to have the responsibilities that his father was pushing onto him. That was the general idea. Fun character, probably would go back to him, but I haven't found really a strong place for that character. Another character, and now I'm fully in roleplay mode. I'm looking up lore. I'm looking up, and this is still prior to starting the channel, but I'm looking up lore, trying to find ways to fit my characters in there and build them up in a way that has them really involved with the setting, but also still have some mechanical power. So prior to after Tomb of Annihilation, we started to play a Innistrad game. Innistrad is very similar to Ravenloft. It is a Magic the Gathering setting where humans are pretty much fending themselves off against all sorts of supernatural beings, werewolves, ghosts, vampires, zombies, etc. So I played a Javor, a human ancestral guardian barbarian, excuse me. We played him all the way up to level 10. This whole game was a reskin of Curse of Strahd, and this character is probably one of the funnest characters I've played. Both mechanically, it was very mechanically satisfying, but also roleplay wise, he was fun to play. He was very much a protector guardian. The character was a member of the Church of Avacyn, and he joined the church early on because as a kid, his family was killed by a vampire attack, and that he and his brother were the only survivors. And then they had eventually made it to Gavany, the main, the core big town of human civilization in the setting, and joined up with the church and became soldiers of the church. Cool. My brother my real brother played my character's brother, so we got to play off each other with that. But mechanically, this was the character that finally merged optimization with roleplay, and I found it like a nice balance. This character was very much a protector of the party, being the first one to step into combat, being a good barbarian, step into combat and protect the group, and it fit all within character, just not something you're doing mechanically. And it was always the first one to, and also always the last one to leave, making sure everybody got out. He was very much defensive and very much oriented in a way that I played him in a very guardian role for the group. Pretty much Ancestral Guardian is one of my favorite subclasses in the game. It does take up a very tank role. You're allowed to prevent damage for people, really giving off that protection vibe. It's the only, and then pretty much have like this soft taunt ability. It's probably the only tank-centered class that I really think encapsulates that MMO feel of a tank. And then, Barbarian with Great Weapon Master just kind of go hand in hand with Reckless Attack. So it was like doing that, feeling gratified of doing a lot of heavier damage with at least 2 attacks, and then still have that defensive aspect and just kind of just keeping the party together, keeping them safe. The whole point of that campaign was we're pretty much a reskin Curse of Strahd. Our characters were guiding the pretty much Innistrad version of Strahd, of love interest, and protecting her against pretty much the Strahd version of in Innistrad of I forget the character's name, the evil guy. But at the same time, since we were big Magic the Gathering heads, we were playing at the time before the Eldrazi, these eldritch beings, managed to start to influence the setting and create this more of this eldritch horror aspect to the setting. And so we're investigating all the weird corruption that was happening and that was distorting the land. And at the same time, we're trying to protect our NPC, and which was fun. We ended it right before the Eldrazi pretty much completely took over the plane. So it was like, Cavalier Fighter, and let me pull it up. We did fix this for you guys. I can bring up your guys' comments. And there we go. That should fix that. There we go. Cavalier Fighter and Armor Artificer have a similar taunt ability. Yep, they do. I just think in terms of their toolkits, Cavalier Fighter, I think, takes a little too long to really get to a point where it feels like a strong tank, and you feel like an actual like MMO tank. That's the big distinction. An MMO tank. Cavalier Fighter is actually a really solid tank for DnD, especially if you could customize it with the fighter's kit and you get all these ability scores. You can put a slot in a bunch of feats and you can do this. And especially if you pair, I think Cavalier with Sentinel Polearm Master, and you have all these features, you're going to be a solid tank. And Armor Artificer, again, I think it's a fun idea with it, but you really have to understand movement and also understand the magical effects you have with that class. The most effective tanking Armor Artificer I saw in actual play was my buddy who played this Doctor Doom inspired character in our Avernus game, because he took the boots that allow you to go back to your previous position. So he had that, for those that play Overwatch, Tracer's whatever abilities where she can pretty much pop back in time to a previous spot. So I had that ability. So, and then he had a Booming Blade. So he would Thunder Punch with the Booming Blade effect, and then go back to his spot, forcing the character to get stuck and not either they get stuck and don't move, or they have to move to attack. And since they could only benefit from really attacking anybody else, they have a disadvantage on anything else. It was like the perfect setup. That's probably the most effective way. But again, that's very D&D mechanic driven, and it is not necessarily how an MMO tank would feel. The Ancestral Guardian feels like an MMO tank. You're preventing damage. You have this, when you're attacking, you're taunting. You're just building up threat. It felt good. So that's the only distinction. And even then, I would even argue that the Ancestral Guardian isn't a true like MMO tank. But I know some other people have in homebrew have been developing their own, and I believe Mage Hand Press has the Warden, and I know our buddy over at Indestructible Terran, he's working on the Vanguard class, which is going to be like a shield based tank class, which is going to be sick. I'm looking forward to that one. So yeah. Anyway, after Innistrad, we jumped over to Ravnica. Guildmaster's Guide Ravnica finally came out. Again, being big Magic the Gathering heads, we're just like, we get to play in our favorite setting. All of us get to play the character in our favorite guild colors. Cool, we're going all in. And then, so me, I love goblins. Goblins are my favorite tribe in Magic. And Boros' red, white are my favorite colors, and it's my favorite guild in Ravnica. So I was like, no brainer, boom. We're going all Boros. We're going Goblin Boros. And Tyke is probably one of my favorite characters I've ever played. He was a Kensei monk. I reflavor the Kensei monk as some sort of martial scout. He was pretty much trained to utilize weapons and with the Boros Legion. The general idea behind this character was he was a former gang member. He used to belong to Krenko's gang. Krenko was pretty much one of the big goblin mob bosses in the city. But he was eventually left the gang life and joined the Boros Legion to better himself. So pretty much he went from a gang member to a cop. And the big driving story, he played with a lot of big elements that are represented in Ravnica, and also that can be like translated into real life. Pretty much goblins are seen as lesser than. They're minorities that kind of just do very, very grunt work. They live very, very poor lives. That's why the gangs are there. They're always Krenko. A big thing of Krenko's philosophy is like, we're only going to protect our own because nobody's protecting us. And but my character had that philosophy, but he took it to a grander scale. The people in Ravnica make the city. Everybody has their place to play, but we need to kind of work together and make everything better for everybody. We're all Ravnicans. So he became the moral compass of the group. A lot of the characters or a lot of the players are playing very aligned to their guild, but our whole mission of this like multi guild alliance was that Nico Bolas in the background was trying to invade Ravnica and manipulating high-ranking members to help make it easier for him to come in and then cause the war, the spark, for those familiar with the card game, and so that he could take over and steal the use Ravnica as a beacon to draw in planeswalkers so he could steal the spark and become a god. So our characters were investigating that, the lead up all to that. My character became the moral compass for the party because he was just like, yeah, everybody has their own agendas for their guild, but if you guys dive too much and only focus on what you're doing, you're going to miss the bigger picture. Somebody's trying to destroy our city. We need to protect our city. And then he died. Through a series of bad rolls, and then you would think I had to make a bunch of deck saves. So we were fighting. What ended up happening? We were fighting corrupt members of the Is It League, which were the blue-red members of blue-red guild aligned, which they are in charge of all the tech advances, the mechanical tech advances in the city. They were pretty much like big artificer wizard guild, and they were packing disintegration heat gun packs. And being a monk, I naturally should be good at deck saves, but I rolled like crap 3 times in a row. Even with my bonuses, I missed every deck save, so my character was vaporized. But the cool thing is, with that character dying and the group losing their moral compass, this moral center, it forced the rest of the party and a lot of role play to have other characters step up and take lead and realize, oh, the fight's actually real. Like, this is a real deal. And yeah, so other characters managed to step up. We continued playing the game, and after Tyke, being a Kensei monk, I really try to focus on in the build wise to use a big old sword. I was like, well, it's a little guy. He's going to use a long sword, but it's probably going to look like a Cloud's Buster sword on him. So I was like, cool, we'll do that. And then he also had a bow. He had a short bow that I would switch to when things got tough and he needed a fight for range. So very well-rounded character. Probably one of the funnest characters I've ever played. Can't really go back to him because he's dead. So, but again, that's the third goblin on this list. I replaced him with Juris. So Juris was a revenant. He was a arcana cleric for 1 level, and then Circle of Sports Druid for another 9. We played this up to 10 levels. The idea behind this character, he was a Golgari member. He was murdered by the Dimir and was brought back to life by the Golgari as a thank you and repayment, but with the loss of his memories. So this whole time he was attempting to he spent his time helping the party, helping them navigate the Undercity, the pretty much like the Underdark, but in Ravnica, helping them navigate the areas and use the Undercity as a base so that the party can hide from Nicobolus's agents. And throughout that whole time hiding, he was attempting to recover his memories, which he eventually did. But pretty much the build behind this character, it was a Booming Blade build. So being a 1 level Arcana cleric and Spores Druid, the whole idea was he would only have 1 attack. It would be Booming Blade. So it was to go into Spore mode, have a bunch of defenses up, and then just go Booming Blade. So with Shillelagh, he would use Shillelagh, and then he would use his Spore Druid to get the temp HP, and then he would go in and Booming Blade. It was a very long setup for a combo that didn't always work out. So this is where I kind of learned sometimes when you try to map things out on paper, an actual play is not going to be as effective or as efficient as you think it is. So for me, it's like this is where my mindset started to really shift from optimization, because it's like, what's the fastest way I can play my concept and feel like I'm playing my concept and not worry about having the white room scenario where everything's always going to be perfect and play as it should. So yeah, this is where I started to move really away from optimization, really going into roleplay. The character was fun to roleplay, but in general, the build when just looking at it on paper seems like it should work in actual play. It wasn't as efficient as I could, because by the time the full setup would happen, combat would be almost over. Or setting it up, since Spore Druid's buffs and abilities were hindered on having temp HP active, specifically given by the Spore Druid's features. If I got hit, and we got hit pretty hard, it would completely prevent me from doing that role, which was supposed to be some sort of Gish Druid. So So just in general, was just not a fun, mechanically fun character to play, but still a fun character to role play. And then we had then after Ravnica, we wanted to try Eberron because the Eberron book came out, and it's probably my favorite D&D setting, I want to say, in terms of like not tied to magic. It's just my one of my favorite. It is probably my favorite D&D setting that's original to D&D. Um, I had been diving super into lore. I had already the channel is already started. I started working, doing stuff on the channel. My mindset is like, what can I play? How do I build my character to fit the concept, and what's gonna make me play have me have the most fun playing the game and feeling I'm involved in the entire setting. I'm enwrapped in the setting. So this was I was like, well, I want to do Captain America in Eberron. Captain America fits in Eberron, some sort of super soldier that was a part of the war effort that mainly was a defender and used pretty much a shield. So how do I do this? And how do I have it set that this character was going to be involved in the actual war, and also become a mercenary afterwards? So it made sense with what we were doing in the campaign. So I made a Warforged, as Warforged were built to fight in the war, and now they were after the war is over. They have their own freedom, but they have no real purpose. So his whole goal was to find a purpose in the world, and he still was generally a good guy and morally good lined and lawful. I went Eldritch Knight because since I felt Warforged can be magical, maybe part of his unit was some sort of like Eldritch with ruins and Arcana built into their system. And I still wanted to play more of a defender. I was like, how do I make the Captain America shield throw aspect and mechanics in 5th edition? So Eldritch Knight has the weapon bond feature. And so I asked my DM, can my shield be a bonded weapon, and can I actually attack with it? And we found some mechanics that my shield was going to be considered a weapon that I can bond it to. And I think it only did like a D6. It was going to just do bludgeoning damage. It was going to be very, very relatively decent. I wasn't really trying to look for doing a powerful attack with the shield. I just wanted to be able to attack with it. And since it was a bonded weapon, I would use the catapult spell to mimic the throwing aspect of the shield. So what I would do on certain turns was use catapult on the shield, throw the shield, and bonus action, retract the shield back to me. And then on other turns, bash people with the shield. I had booming blade, so I would just booming blade bash people with the shield. And then since I had such a high AC, I would just step away and force them to come to me. Since I was still relatively close, I think I would have maybe take 5 to 10 feet step back most of the time. But I stopped playing this character because what I found out when playing and role playing and really being centered in role play, that sometimes your characters really don't mesh with the group. And the group that he was a part of was really just a bunch of dirty sky pirates that were scoundrels. And I was trying to play the good, heroic, moral character. And if everybody's being these neutral, morally gray, and is willing to overstep their bounds, and you have the one good guy that's trying to tell police people to say no, it causes a little too much conflict. And while my players, we've been playing for a while now, at this point we have a level of trust. The character just mechanically fit, but personality didn't fit with the group. So I asked my DM, hey, I foresee this character going against the group a lot in the future because of where he stands on their decisions and what he would do. So I'm like, can we exit him, and I'll just bring in somebody that fits, that does a better job of fitting in within the group. So then enter Merrick, the King Kanan, a shifter Oath of Glory paladin that's level 7. That's just where we ended our campaign for this one. He was a disgraced athlete that was exposed for fixing matches by the halfling mob, and that the party found him in a fight ring in a fight club because he was going into underground cage fights to gain money to pretty much pay back the mob, and also fixing fights so that the mob would all win, so that he could give them all the winnings and the money that they were betting on. he managed to escape because the Sky Pirate group found that fight club, and they need to investigate and see. We're trying to find the connections between that fight club and the terrorist group, the Emerald Claw. And so he escaped with them, understanding, letting them know, hey, I'm leaving with you. The mob's going to come after you guys. So if you guys are cool with it, I'm good. Yeah, morally gray party. Yeah, you guys were morally gray. Where it was mainly a bunch of everybody was playing Han Solo. That's pretty much what it came down to. A lot of people were playing Han Solo. They were playing this very selfish. The group was collectively selfish. They were looked out for each other, but like they would overstep their bounds. And Merrick was a bit of a himbo shifter that just played the enforcer role that my previous character played. But he would go along with their morally gray because he himself was willing to act corrupt if needed to. After this campaign, we were just like, oh well, let's try another Eberron campaign, a little bit more shorter, focused. And then we played a short level 4 campaign featuring characters from the Circle of the Flame. Circle of the Flame is a religious military group from another country within the setting of Eberron, and where we're going to go hunt demons. Very, very simple. Of course, this game was a lot more mechanic driven, and I, of course, brought a heavy roleplay character to that party. The party still, up until now, didn't realize my character was a changeling. So, my character was, real name was Tyrion, but he went by the name Raynor because he took on the persona of his dead adopted father. And that was the whole thing. So he took on that persona because his father was this awesome general that was able to inspire and lead the people during the war, and that the character had doubts about who he was supposed to be. So instead of just trying to find out who he is, he was just going to be the person he looked up to, so that other people he can lead other people. And he was being manipulated by the church to pretty much continue as his father. That was kind of the background. But since this game was way more mechanic driven, and none of that stuff came up, I pretty much stayed as Raynor the entire time. Nobody knew I was a changeling or anything. I used the College of the Dirge Singer subclass Bard from Exploring Eberron, which is a third-party book by Keith Baker himself, and then also did a 1-level dip in the Hexblade Warlock because I still wanted to be a martial character, as I was a trained soldier. College of the Dirge Singer is supposed to be inspired by the goblins in the Eberron setting, but if you look at the toolkit, it's actually a really strong subclass to mimic this sort of field commander aspect. So mixing those two together, I was able to use my bardic inspiration, move people around, relocate them, and then also attack on my own. Again, this was another booming blade build too on top of this, because I freaking, that's my favorite cantrip, because it really encapsulates that that magic martial character that people are really wanting. Like, I feel that's kind of hard missing in the official class. But again, nobody knew I was a changeling. Everybody thought I was just a normal human. There was really no roleplay hints to do this. Also, we were playing online, so it was like us getting used to do that. The character itself, since we were playing a very mechanical combat-driven game, and I brought a roleplay heavier character, he wasn't as fun to play. So pretty much those are my characters until now. Now, we're starting back up. Actually, today is our second session. We're picking our characters back up that we left off on Storm King's Thunder. So I am back to playing Liberius Levin, and we're coming off at level 14. But since I left off as a UA Gunsmith Artificer, I get to upgrade to the current Artificer. And normally you would think if I'm already using a gun, I would take Artillerist. But since a big aspect of that character in our Storm King's Thunder campaign as we roleplayed was that I was building pets, I was building mechanical machines to help me fight, I went Battlesmith Artificer instead, so I can get my mechanical pet. So I will be using that, and also I'm going to go with more of a melee build and using Booming Blade again, so that because the party is primarily composed of ranged characters, so we needed something to kind of bridge that gap and have another tank in the party, another frontliner. So yeah, and pretty much it still fits within the character, even though he was big super nerd. He There was a lot of other martial characters from the previous campaign that are no longer playing that he pretty much were saying that he learned how to fight through them. So, but yeah, Liberius Levin is probably my longest running character. He's part of it too because there's some aspects of me in that character, but I've had more time to develop him and connect with the party and the players in that way that it's very easy to slip into this character and just play him. The driving force behind him is his guilt over loss, and he's always trying to fill that void. So that's why he builds his machines. He builds people. He's pretty much still struggling with the loss of his family and his entire hometown. Everything he knew growing up is completely gone. So his sole mission now is to get strong enough, get the magic items, find something to help him kill the ancient green dragon that pretty much destroyed his home, and eventually probably kill Tiamat herself. Pretty much he sees the group as his new family, but he himself has taken up more of a somewhat leadership role, but in a different way. As he'll take lead on arcane troubles and more of the back end secretive stuff with the party, while he allows other members that are either military driven. We have a high elf character that's a wizard that's also part of the Silver Moon military. So when it comes to those matters, he allows them to take charge for the group in there. And now we have 2 bards in the party, so it's going to be interesting since these 2 intelligence-based characters tended to be the face of the party a lot of the time. It's going to be interesting to see how these new characters play. Changelings are interesting in political campaigns. Yeah, I think I can bring this character back, the Tyrann, Rainer Braum, if it's in a more roleplay-centered political game. I think it would be a lot more interesting in there, where pretty much play like a like secret invasion scroll-esque sort of thing with the character. But yeah, it just wasn't the right character for that campaign. So some other things I just wanted to kind of go over. One thing I wanted to answer: have you ever played an evil character? Have I ever played an evil character? No, not because I don't want to. It's because I haven't had the opportunity to. So my group has built enough trust that an evil character can appear in the game and it doesn't disrupt the flow of the game. And it also doesn't cause bad feelings or bad emotions with the player amongst the play group, because we know that the character itself is bad, but the player themselves is not. So, and I think sometimes that gets lost, especially if you're playing with strangers. You don't really know people well enough that can happen, where you're basing their entire personality or them on that character they're playing, because that's really all you know of them. But there's a level of trust you have to be, and also playing an evil character doesn't just mean you do evil stuff. Doesn't mean you do stuff that hurts the party. Playing an evil character still means you need to play towards the party. You're playing towards the goals and you play towards the table. But it's how you go about those goals determines whether you're considered good or evil. And again, in our Avernus campaign, one of the characters started off as an evil warlock that was part of that was worshipped Levistus. His goals were still to help the party to either destroy or freeze Ariel. But how he went about it was very selfish. He would not waste an opportunity to talk down to one of the other players, but none of those actions worked against the party. Do I want to play an evil character? Yes. I just need to find the right campaign and the right character that will do it. I'm just waiting, because it's just having a evil, quote unquote, evil aligned character in a party of like characters that have different moralities. It's fun because it does bring increase the tension, and it just is fun RP, but it does have to be a certain way. You do have to do it in a correct way. and it really comes down to playing towards the table and not working against the party. Your goals have to be still aligned. It's just it's pretty much the way you got to treat it is if everybody's playing the Fantastic Four and you're playing Doctor Doom, that has to guest star in that episode. Reed Richards and Doctor Doom's goals still align. It's just Doctor Doom is Doctor Doom, and we'll do it in his way. In terms of characters that I did not enjoy playing, so there was a bunch of characters, and I said like, oh, I stopped playing them. Okay, I want to go over them a little bit. Characters that I did not enjoy playing. I want to kind of dig slightly a little deeper and why these characters I found kind of suck. If I could find my... Oh, here they are. Here it is. Characters I didn't like playing. So, Calrock, my half-orc battlemaster. Again, I didn't enjoy playing him because he was pure mechanics driven. There was no character to him. He had 3 stats that were under 10. He just failed and missed a lot. He just was not mechanically satisfying. At this time, I thought fighters suck. Fighters are probably one of my favorite classes in the game now. If I were to return to this character, I would find a different way to bring him back and find an angle and roleplay angle, like find a roleplay element for this character. But yeah, it's just one of those things. It's your first character, you don't really know what you're doing, and you just didn't. I felt very limited, so that's why I brought in Levin. Next character was Sprat, and again, College of Maestro Bard just felt very underwhelming. Also, since I was still coming off this mechanically driven kick, I didn't feel necessarily powerful, as the Bard doesn't have damage options that feel like they just feel like you're rolling big damage numbers. Again, I would play a Bard again. I think the Bard class is really, really solid, but going into it, you have to understand it is a support role, so you need to do support things, which was different. And I didn't have that mindset going into the character. Also, the character themselves, just roleplay was very flat. It was very one note. His shtick got really, really old. There was no real angle to develop him beyond it. So again, just didn't feel fun playing that character anymore. Other character, Merrick the King Kanan. Love role-playing this character. Paladins I know people say that they're probably one of the strongest classes in 5th edition, that they're very, very powerful. Oath of the Glory and the class itself is very boring. Paladins are a very boring class for me. A lot of their buffs, they're not active, and you don't get anything active until later into the subclasses kit. Pretty much you have some spells, you have smite, and then you have auras really early on. So the smite mechanics, I feel at times there's this tension, is like, do you use it now or you don't use it? When's the most optimal way to use that mechanic? Do we wait for a crit, or you just go ham and just like blow your spell slots on this? So that tension was something I did not like. I felt that I had to wait too much, and then there was no right time to when to use smite. On top of that, since that was my only active feature, auras, while awesome, you just stand there. And that's it. Like I felt like there was nothing active about the class. The character was fun. This sort of disgraced celebrity athlete, just trying to become better and pretty much reclaim that former glory and see themselves in a better light. Have you asked your DM? Oh, let's bring up this other question. Have you ever asked your DM for extra proficiencies like tools and musical instruments to flesh out your character? Not necessarily tools or musical instruments. I've asked if I can like take different skills or different stuff compared to what normally is given to you. But normally for extra stuff, we've had other stuff that helps flesh out our character due to events in the game. So a big note about my character Levin, when he regained his body, it had been modified. So the whole story behind the character is that the Warforged armor that his soul was trapped in, after we regained the body, that body was shunted into Ravenloft, a halfling artificer, had been snatching up bodies so that he can experiment on them and create super weird monstrosities. Levin's body was taken, and then he has a beholder eye for one of his eyes. So I got one of the rays in there. We have stuff like that gives us little extra bonuses, but most of the time, if we really want something, we don't try to get extra. We ask and talk to the DM if we can switch this one aspect for something else that is relatively the same. For example, I want to add a violin, flute, and brewer's supplies to him for his adopted parents, elf and dwarf inheritor, kind of mix between both worlds in the form of human. Yeah, and for me, it's like if you do this, if a DM just doesn't want to give you those things on top of what you have, I would look either if player options are going to give you that, or if they don't, I would ask to see if you can swap stuff that normally you would be given as 1-for-1 swaps for that kind of stuff, so you kind of get what you want. I think 5e doesn't, even with Tasha's rules, does an okay job of like allowing that to happen now, like as codified in the rules, but it still doesn't go far enough for full customization. I think, what was it? There's a supplement called Those Who Wander. It's not a supplement. It's like it's his own game that uses the 5e SRD with that alters how you actually build characters. You could play it standalone, and that allows for that kind of stuff because the character creation's a hell of a lot more expansive. And then the other character, Terran or Rainer Braum, he just didn't. It was a roleplay driven character in a mechanically driven game, so that's why I just didn't enjoy playing him. Characters that I enjoyed playing though, Pakar Shattergate, even though he was generally a mechanic driven character, he was a mechanically driven character. The idea of this little sneaky shisty goblin that would be stealing stuff and try to resell it to people to get money and get rich was fun. And just Arcane Trickster is probably in my top 5 favorite classes I've ever played. It's just a very, very fun class that mixes the rogue elements of being a very skillful character and also spell casting to be very, very tricky. It was just mechanically very fun to play, and the character has enough of a roleplay base that I want to bring him back eventually, and then also update it to use the current Goblin rules for him. So it just fits really, really well with it. Javor, I think has been one of my favorite characters that mixes mechanics with roleplay and like is this perfect mesh. He was a very, very fun character to play. I wasn't a typical dumb barbarian trope. It was more so like I'm everybody's big brother and I'm just trying, or big brother or dad that is just trying to protect everybody and make sure everybody gets out alive. It was just a very, very fun character to play. It never felt one note. And he was just like a good guy vibes. Tyke is another fun character because again, it was like very much good guy vibes. Monk, for as much as everybody gives it crap for being underpowered, mechanically satisfying to play. I always felt I was able to be effective in combat, even if I wasn't putting out numbers. I think it was just because I was able to interact a lot in a bunch of different ways, either furry blows and just trying to take out like small targets, or like trying to stunning strike. I was always trying to do something to give my party the leverage they needed in the combat, trying to shut somebody down, just going full on Cloud Strife, Limit Break style, and just beat the hell out of them with my sword. And then on top of that, the roleplay elements of being this moral compass, eyes to the street sort of a detective beat cop was really, really fun to play. What's going on, Pez? We're still going over the characters. We're going over my favorites right now after we just talked about all the ones I didn't like playing and going over every single one. Merrick King Kanan, or actually, let's go. Ward, another fun character, just wrong campaign, but having another this very much Captain America-esque moral compass that was the group's enforcer and protector, and being able to merge again, it was a fighter subclass, and the Eldritch Knight is just very, very fun to play. And people kind of sleep on it. It's just very, very defensive, hard to take out kind of character. Um, I would bring him back if we were playing Eberron and we had a more of a good line party that was a bit more I guess good leaning. I would bring this character back. He was mechanically satisfying and fun to roleplay, talking sort of robotic in a little way. American King Kanan, fun to roleplay. So he is one of my favorite characters. I want to come back to him, but I probably would ask if I could change his class completely. Just not mechanically fun to play. I find paladins very boring. I probably would ask if I can just be a barbarian with this character, because it still fits within this more athletic role. What I'm trying to do. And again, Liberius Levin, my longest running character. He is very very fun to play, and I'm gonna tonight I will get to actually feel and see how the new Artificer works. The updated new Artificer that was brought in Ebron and reprinted in Tasha's. Um, just having this character that's kind of evolved and went from not having a backstory to retconning and giving him one, and allowing for that development into where he is now. Starting off pretty much as this nerdy kid that had no clue what he was doing, to going through some sort of tragic pain and finding a purpose, and pretty much trying to find his place in the world after everything was kind of lost. Was there any class or race features that you didn't like or understand? Um, let me hold on. Let me pull this up. Was there any class or race features? The entire paladin class. Paladin is good. Like, don't get me wrong. On paper, it is a super powerful, team-oriented class. And in all honesty, if I look at the paladin, and I was starting to play today, but I knew what kind of like character I wanted to play, Paladin checks all the boxes for me. It's a social facing class that does martial and magic. It hits stuff, but it also uses spell casting. So, and it's team oriented. So like it clicks 4 boxes for me. But the kit together, since there is no active features from the class for a very long time, and also from the subclass, standing there and just like deciding whether I smite or not doesn't feel good compared to something like a barbarian, where it's like I'm actively using reckless attack, positioning myself. If do I have Great Master? Cool, Great Master or reckless attack, and going ham, hitting and beating the hell out of one person. And then in the case of Ancestral Guardian, okay, well my teammates right there. Oh, they're gonna get hit. Cool, let's negate some damage for them. Let's put the focus back onto me. Make everybody hit me. It feels more gratifying compared to the Paladin. It's like, yes, everybody gets buffs if they just stand next to me and I do nothing. For me, it's like that core playstyle of the Paladin just didn't suit that gratification I needed. In terms of race features, I think there's nothing really that stands out because I played pretty basic race option. Human, even though like everybody goes variant human, 11 was the base human. I just got +1s and everything. I didn't really do anything too much to change him. Just base human. My 2 goblins were homebrew until the new goblin came out. So there wasn't really anything I felt bad with the homebrew options, because I just had to accept it. Let's see. I think the only one that I probably could say was like it was a little iffy was, let's see, was the shifter, because you had to use a bonus action to do the shifting angle of the character, which kind of like, depending on how you're playing and you're doing your paladin, if you have any bonus action stuff, you're not going to always want to shift at times, or didn't have the opportunity to shift. So yeah, I think that's the only thing with the, out of the characters I played, the shifting mechanic I didn't always feel I can use it correctly. And also, I think the only other thing, Ward, my Warforge, Eldritch Knight and extra attack, and not being able to use cantrips at the same time. I think that's another thing that was a little weird. That you had to wait until a later level to be able to use a cantrip, and then as a bonus action attack. And then you have stuff like Blade Singer that can use a cantrip and still make an attack as their attack action. So just one of those things. I think it's the only thing with out of the characters that I'm like, that kind of sucked. but not necessarily things that are gonna that I think hurt the game. You just gotta kind of work around them. Uh, Adding to Dreamweaver, are there any characters that you would want to update with a new race, class, or subclass? Okay, Merrick the King Kanan, I want to bring him back, but as a barbarian. It just fits uh, better, or maybe go fighter with that character too. Maybe, or maybe some sort of multi-class. Um, Other characters I would update. Levin's got to update. He's going to be a battlesmith artificer now. Let's see if I can bring back Picaro, my goblin arcane trickster rogue. I would just update him to the. I would update him to one of the official goblins. I'm just not sure if I wanted to play the Fey angle with the new monsters of the multiverse with him, which would be something interesting. I can add a curveball to what he is, and maybe that's part of why he gets his arcane trickster abilities. That maybe I can play with that different angle and say that the Shatter Gang isn't a goblin gang that's from the material plane. They're actually from the Feywild, and that they're actually all scattered throughout the material plane, trying to cause havoc. But yeah, in terms of other characters, probably not. I normally, when I make my character, I'm pretty solidified in the role they play, and if I want to change their race, um, at that point, I would just make a new character that's either similar or plays with similar themes, but do it through a different lens that's more suiting to the race and options and the world that they're going to be presented in. That's really what I try to go to. Is every character I play, I want to fit it into the world so that they're active with the themes and they feel like they fit within the setting. So that one, really, it's so that my DM has lore they can draw upon, and also that lore that they can play with, could also be spit back to the players so that we can expand it and have our characters hooked. It's for me, it's like that 1-to-1 relationship between the DM and the players. Like the DM, it helps the DM kind of know what sort of lore and angle and interaction we kind of want with the world when we do that. When we actually play with some of the lore and stuff, and in cases of like players playing homebrew settings, that's when you just have that conversation with the DM. Is like, hey, I want to do this. Where does this fit within the world, and what kind of stuff can I openly play with? Because then that signals to the DM, oh, they want to do this angle. Cool, I could start playing with these elements in my setting. Yeah, the normal human should have more interesting features so that the variant human isn't the go-to choice. Yeah, for me, it made more sense to go base human. I didn't really need feats, and with Levin, after pretty much I respect him and let him kind of develop as a character. The feats I took were in direct response to the story that we were playing. So I ended up taking Prodigy, because it just fit with the character. This kid, when they met the character, he was an 18-year-old kid that had already graduated school. He was already in college, out of wizard school, and was just this nerd. So it made sense. Yeah, he should have the Prodigy feat. And then since we also needed a party face, so it's like, well, he's been active in talking to people. He probably developed the persuasion skill to be able to talk to people. He doesn't try to intimidate them. He doesn't try to lie to them. He's pretty honest and just upfront with people and trying to get information. So persuasion made a lot of sense, since Arcana and all the other skills I had were already super high. So that's one thing too to really consider when you're building your character, and not try to map out a full build completely, because sometimes the game will dictate and drive you in different directions. And for me, it's like, yes, it's nice to see, like, if you're gonna play a barbarian, great weapon master, or even the sentinel polearm feat, and something like that. Especially if that's core to the playstyle of your character and the angle you want to play. For example, my brother played a Battlemaster fighter in our Avernus game, but his whole idea was like, I want to use a polearm. I want to be this sort of defender character. Well, it made sense. Polearm Master Sentinel combo for the character. That was already pre-planned. Anything else after that, go ham and let the story dictate. what you want to do or what's going to happen, and they can make changes. You might end up changing feats in the path you're going to take multi-class when you didn't plan a multi-class. So there's stuff like that. In terms of the last bit after talking with the characters, so the biggest thing I wanted to touch on, and we're kind of running longer than I thought, but I wanted to touch on, obviously I went from being more mechanics and even optimized driven to more of a narrative driven role player in how I view the game. Big caveat I want to or big thing I want to point out, I don't think optimization's bad. It's just not my preferred play style and preferred way to look at the game. I think as a player, yes, as you progress and learn more about the game, you're going to have more of a better idea of how the mechanics work. But it doesn't necessarily mean you should always choose the best option. Knowing how the mechanics work lets you support your character fantasy a hell of a lot better, and you get to play the character you really, really want to play. So why I change, and why did I make this shift from mechanically driven to roleplay driven? And try to find that balance between both. I don't think these things they're like directly opposed, but I do have more of a viewpoint of being more story driven and looking at the narrative to fit myself in the world and how I play. In my earlier characters, I felt there was a huge lack of connection between what I wanted out of the game and how these characters fit into the world, and my overall enjoyment. I just wasn't enjoying myself. I just felt I was playing a game and not role playing. I wasn't involved in the setting, and it was nothing against my DMs at all. This was more on my side. You show up to a game and just like play a mechanic bot. Well, the game's gonna only be a mechanic bot. It's only gonna be mechanics. You're only gonna play a combat simulator. So we started playing DnD because, again, it was something to do after we played Magic on Friday nights, and we got tired of playing Magic after hours of playing Magic. It was just one of those things. We just didn't want to continue playing the same game. We wanted to do something new. A lot of it was our first time playing D&D, so again, we were very mechanic oriented. We were mechanic bots. Some of us had very loose RP. Some of our characters didn't. It was just mechanics. We approached it very much like a video game. So again, not only were we competitive players for Magic, where we looked at the most optimum and efficient cards to play in our competitive deck, a lot of us used to play Warcraft and other games, so it was just like, what's the best build to do the thing I want to do when we're raiding? That's how we all approached D&D. What's the best way to win? And again, learning the game and not knowing your resource management and not knowing when to efficiently use certain things or being okay with using your abilities. My first character really was boring. Cal Rock was a very boring character to play, and he felt really, really flat. Again, not building a sense of connection to the game. And then I bring in to replace him was Levin, my longest running character. But even then, in this earlier stage of playing D&D, there was still a lack of connection. I would only focus on the mechanics. What best spells did I take? What feats should I take? What's the most optimal strategy to win D&D? Again, the character, while I had options that felt satisfying for being active and spellcasting and being able to have an effect in combat, there was no story behind him. So it was just like, well, I don't know what story we're telling since I don't have a story. My DM wasn't really driving a story for any of the characters personally. It was just more so a bunch of loose adventures that we're kind of putting together. So again, this lack of connection not only hurt or made me dissatisfied from playing, it also made it so that our original game, didn't really have a story direction, regardless of how hard my DM tried to kind of like fit some stuff together. All right, we have a question. Seeing this. Oh, would you allow extended spell lists for old sorcerer subclasses as a DM? Yes, I would. I would probably work with the player to see kind of what they're wanting. And then also see if I can come up with ideas that also push or help support a role either that they're wanting to play or that I see the subclass doing, so that they do a better, like they can feel like the fantasy they want to play. I think I'm hoping that the old sorcerers do get that update in 2024 with a new update. But yeah, I'm totally down for it. I know in Baldur's Gate 3, the dragon sorcerer subclass has an expanded spell list depending on which um, dragon origin you take for it. You get like an extra spell. So yeah, I'm fully down for it. I think it's over time, like it's way overdue. That especially for a spellcasting class, they should have access to spells that help support that fantasy. Okay. Next, what was the big influence that had me change? Well, you guys see Critical Role on there. After taking that break from playing my first three characters, and then our group took a break, started playing board games and other games. I got heavily into watching Critical Role Campaign 1. I don't watch Critical Role anymore. I don't have time for it, and it just the newer campaigns just don't have that same spark for me anymore. There's something very magical about Campaign 1 that I don't feel that they're going to be able to recreate. And I don't think they should. They should just continue what they're doing, is doing new experiences with the campaigns they're playing. But Campaign 1 was lightning in a bottle. It was the thing that showed me D&D can be more than just mechanics. It can be just more than one aspect of the game, that there is a storytelling element to this, that everybody's having a shared experience telling a story, and that the mechanics should support that story. So for me, it's like, it was the light bulb hit. I was like, that's what I'm missing. I'm missing a character. I'm playing D&D as a game and not realizing that I'm only getting half the experience. So big things I want to bring up though, like I'm obviously doing that. I think the horror stories people say is like, oh, you get into CR and you want your DM to be Matt Mercer, and that you're going to be mimicking all the other players. You're going to be these actors. I was very much grounded in this. None of us are actors. None of my play groups actors. We just have a lot of fun goofing off and doing stupid voices and making the game our own. It's not something I would find entertaining to watch, but it's entertaining for us to hang out and do. So it was going that I wasn't necessarily wanting a CR experience. I wanted our own experience. Just I want something that had a little bit more weight behind the characters and more story, so we had a direction. And that's what I felt was missing. Oh, my characters aren't characters; they're just mechanics. They're just a character sheet with nothing kind of giving me any direction of give me a direction of how I should utilize those mechanics, or how those mechanics support my character. I get into a mindset. So, with that, the light bulb click when I started bringing in new characters. That was my mindset. It's like, well, what kind of where does this character fit in the build? What themes I want to play with, and to some degree, that was good and bad. For me, it's like if you're too focused on role playing, you don't bring in a mechanically supported character that can help the campaign, help the play group. You're still only playing half the game. So bridging the gap between both having mechanics that are going to help you define and play your role in your character fantasy, and also having the roleplay element that those mechanics support, is where optimization fits into that puzzle, but not necessarily full-on optimization. Is more so having a good understanding and grasp of player options and kind of the options you have at your disposal to help support it. I think not having that knowledge and just focusing on one aspect of the game hurts you in different ways. The last thing that had me change my view was that I felt optimization brought limitations. This is a mindset I've had that carried over from other games I played. So I started to feel that same thing with it. For me, my view of optimization, again, I want to reiterate, I don't think anybody that focuses or plays in this way is doing it wrong. You play your game how you want. But for me, it felt very limiting. Optimization for me meant finding the most powerful option that made the most efficient use of my resources. You're always going to want to take the best thing, because the best thing normally is very powerful and doesn't require a lot of resources to use to pop it off. But when you look at optimization in a very set of rules of the game solves the game pretty quick. And that you're always going to pick options that outperform others, no matter if it fits with your character or not, just because they're generally better. And what I mean by they limit you, or before I get into that, my mindset was like seeing that the game is just going to get pretty solved. What you're solving is, how do you win D&D? That's really the problem that you're solving as I see as an optimizer. You can frame it however you want and say, okay, well, I'm trying to get the best and do the best damage or use the most efficient spell to do this. But what does that ultimately come down to? Why do you need to use the best version of that spell? It's to win. It's a competitive mindset, understandably, and I get that mindset, especially coming from a competitive background going into D&D. But D&D isn't about winning, at least not in a competitive sense. D&D for me is about everybody telling a story together, mechanics helping telling a story. Winning and losing are equally important in D&D. Those are two facets of storytelling that push the story. Sometimes your characters are going to lose. How bad they lose, um, yes, that can make or break a campaign, but not always. Losing sometimes helps drive the story further. And like in the case of my goblin Tyke, I lost that character. He died, but the story continued, and it pushed the other characters to take up his role and push them in new roleplay angles and explore their characters a lot further. How like and pretty much the core thing of Ravnica is your moral compass was just killed by the thing you guys are trying to stop. Who takes lead now? Who steps up and who takes that role? And what do you do to do that? The fight became very personal for these characters now, and the characters all grew from it. They all were just like, okay, well, my brother's character kind of started stepping up and started to reveal that he was a Demir. Um, some of the other characters, were now diving into other aspects of the game to make themselves better, so they can prevent death from happening again. It's just every character played things differently after that point, and that's okay. That's losing is part of D&D. Optimization wants you to minimize that in a competitive sense. And for me, if you're always going to look for the best option at every point in the game, you limit your view of other options that are better suited for the character you're attempting to play. Those options may be more efficient at what they're supposed to do, but they might not actually fit with the fantasy you're trying to inhabit and play with the game. So that's what I felt. If my point of view, like your viewpoint is only looking at the best feats, the most efficient strategy, the most efficient spells, the most efficient subclass, and at that point you're only sticking to looking at a character in one view, and you're not looking at the range, the spectrum of variety that you can play that may better support the character you want to play. So those threes combined, when we came back and started playing Storm King's Thunder, it still was a bit of a rough thing, but now getting up to playing multiple campaigns after Storm King's Thunder and really getting to other characters like Tyke, and now fully understandably getting into bringing back Levin, and now with this new mindset of being more story driven, but with that balance of having this understanding of what mechanics are good or are strong, or at least aware of their uses. I can better look at mechanics and be like, well, yes, fireball is good, but my character doesn't throw fireballs. What's another spell that does its similar function, maybe not be as strong, but fits within my character? And what's going to suit the story that I'm intending to play, and also support the story and help uplift the stories and the roleplay of the players at the table. Because another thing, when building characters, we tend to do it a lot in isolation. Admittedly, even I think I'm at fault for this when I put out my character build videos. We're only building a character for ourselves, and we're only looking at the possibilities and the strengths and weaknesses of that character, not necessarily always looking at what role they are functioning in the party, or what role play they want to bring to the party. And admittedly, I think I miss that at times too when I present my own character build videos. And I know a lot of other people that talk about character building and optimization, especially on the optimization angle. It's what is the best thing you can do? What is the most powerful thing you can do? And not necessarily what they're going to bring to the party at times. So now I also approach that angle. What is this character wanting to do, and what story am I wanting to tell? But does that story fit within the rest of the party? So yeah, and that's pretty much what it comes down to. Just seeing Critical Role showing me that there's more to D&D besides mechanics, and that it's another it's a set of the mechanics are a set of tools to help tell a story in a shape of a game, and that I felt that there was a lack of connection between the mechanic driven characters, between myself and me connecting to the game and the setting and the lore and the story we're trying to tell, and that by focusing too much on the best options, the most efficient options, that I limited my view of what I was able to play, what I was attending to do. So this came down to what I wanted to do with the channel. Or I really wanted to focus on player options and not necessarily show you like what's the best option, but try to show you how you can use different options, a variety of options to still play your character, even if it's not the most optimal one. That was the original intention behind the channel. We're kind of expanding now to not just include that, but also look at different aspects of D&D and how to better support your game in a story-driven manner. So that's, excuse me, on both sides of the DM screen. So yeah, and that's pretty much why I switched, and I'm having I fell in love with the game because of this. That I'm able to sit around with my buddies, tell a story, and have fun. I'm back. I've been in the DM seat for at least a year and a half. Running Avernus. I'm now back in the player seat. I'm having fun. We had only one game where I got to play 11 again, and it was fun. I didn't have to stress about making the game, but having this mindset as a player, and when you step into the DM, it does affect how you play and run your game as a DM. Because in my mindset now is like, what's the experience I'm trying to craft with my players, knowing that my players, some of them are a little bit more mechanics driven and want to play combat, but also that a lot of them like to roleplay. How do I bridge that gap and make that experience fun for everybody? That still give them a story-driven campaign that still has an ounce of mechanics. Yeah, Wolfsbane, a good option. Yeah, I'm gonna bring this up. Yeah, and this is a good thing because I see this, and the optimizers bring up this point. I just don't think some of the more prominent ones um, say this loud enough or don't agree with it. But there's some that I know that do, that understand that optimization is just one aspect of the game, but isn't the entire game. Um, a good option to be a good optimizer while also having RPs to have a goal that the characters focus on. Yep, and yeah, optimizing within limits is a perfect way to approach it too, and especially for those that are optimizing. Um, you can take what is considered a bad option and optimize it to be an efficient and viable option, or even powerful option if you do so and have a character wrapped around it. It's awesome. That's why I don't think optimization is bad. I just think if that's the only lens you're looking through, at times you're blinding yourself. Just gotta take those shades off a bit. All right, and yeah, pretty much those are all my characters. I've ran over a bit, so I do need to head out for the day. Got some cleaning and stuff to do. I got my game tonight. So yeah, hopefully you guys learned some stuff about this, and then pretty much how my approach is when coming to looking at character options in D&D, and how I approach doing character builds and stuff. Because this is really informs my mindset of how I look at stuff. Um, I do want to at least give you guys viable mechanics to kind of draw from, but mainly my character builds are built in a way that's why I only go from 1 to 10 to give you inspiration ideas so you guys can just take it and run with it. Because yeah, it's just one of those things. I'm very aware how things can be presented online, where people take content creators and content creators and influencers words as gospel in this space. And for me, it's like, just because I or somebody else says something and they say that that's the way it is, isn't always right, isn't true. I try not to do that. I want you guys to just here. I'm sharing my ideas with you guys, and you guys run with it and do everything to make it yours. I only want to serve my ideas to help inspire you to play your games. I don't intend for my stuff to be considered as definite. That this is the correct way to play. I don't think that's the correct. You play however you're in your table and have fun. As long as your fun doesn't overstep anybody else's fun. That's all good for me. We're all playing D&D, no matter how we interpret it. Well, sweet. My first character was a life cleric, as I was a sub for the beginning of the campaign. I wrote him as a man focused on preserving life, as his previous didn't, despite his domain. Oh, interesting. I still haven't played a cleric. There's still some classes I have yet to play: cleric, warlock, sorcerer. I believe of the big three I have yet to play. I've pretty much played everything else. But like a lot of characters that I've played, certain classes were one-shot characters or like smaller campaigns that didn't really have a big impact on my mindset. So some of them weren't listed. Like Ranger, I played Ranger a couple times, so that I felt I have a good grasp of the character, but it's not necessarily the characters were all one-shot kind of characters. So that's why they weren't listed. But yeah, warlock, cleric, and sorcerer are like my last three I need to play through. So again, thank you guys for showing up this weekend. Next week there's gonna be no live stream. I'm gonna take, like I've said, I'm gonna be taking like a week break from content. I might turn this one into a mini video. We'll see. So see how cohesive I can make, maybe think something. But I'm hoping by July 1st or July 5th, Tuesday, after the July 4th weekend, I drop a full video. I'm trying something new. We're going to be talking about making impactful villains for your campaign. So expect that one out. Expect that one to be hopefully the week of July 5th. I want to get it out on that Tuesday after the 4th of July weekend. But we'll see. Also, hopefully I have some more like graphical updates and designs that I'm waiting for some stuff to finish that I want to spoil, but I'm waiting because it's going to be a nice, awesome surprise. So yeah. So again, thank you guys for showing up. Thank you, Wolfsbane, Dreamweaver, Sansa. Let's see who else. Pez, my cousin Red Wolf, Thunderwolf. Thank you guys for all showing up. So next week, no video, no live stream. We're gonna take a little bit of a breather, and so I can spend some time editing, and then we'll be back the following week. Pretty much back in the first weekend of July. So again, thank you guys for showing up. You guys obviously support the channel freely. Like, comment, subscribe on everything. Support the channel directly. You can go to Patreon and throw a couple dollars there. And yeah, that's pretty much it. You want to talk more about my characters or even your characters, the Discord link is in the description. Join the Discord. We have a fun, small, active community there that is all about pretty much helping each other build and talk about their characters or look at homebrew options or talk about anything D&D. I'd love to have you guys all there. So again, until next time, guys, I'll see you guys in a week or so. You guys have a good one. Take care.